The humid tidewater air hung heavy over Naval Station Norfolk, a thick, gray blanket tasting of salt and diesel fuel. It was 0530, and the relentless Virginia sun was still a rumor, held at bay by a coastal chill that permeated the sprawling naval base. The installation, a fortress of steel and concrete, hummed with a contained, powerful energy. Under the stark glare of floodlights on the airfield, crews readied transport planes, their shouts swallowed by the roar of engines being pushed to their limits. Lieutenant Alex Hawkrenner stood just inside the cavernous opening of Hangar 4, a makeshift processing center for units rotating in and out. In his early 30s, Alex had the lean, powerful build of a man whose profession was the precise application of force, a product of his years as a Navy SEAL. His sharp gray eyes were in constant motion, a deeply ingrained habit from years spent in places where a moment's inattention was fatal. He was in a mandatory cool-down period after a deployment that was still too vivid, the quiet of the base a jarring contrast to the ringing in his ears. At his side, perfectly aligned with his left leg, sat Thor. A 4-year-old sable German shepherd, Thor was a military working dog with a service record as distinguished as any operator's. He was 90 pounds of disciplined muscle, with an intelligent, noble head and eyes that held a sharp, knowing gaze. Thor was more than an asset, he was a partner. Their bond had been forged in the mountain passes of Afghanistan and the dense jungles of South America. Thor had saved Alex's life twice. Alex had saved Thor's 3 times. Theirs was a partnership that went beyond handler and animal, a silent, almost telepathic understanding built on shared danger and unwavering trust. "Morning, Lieutenant," a gruff voice sounded. Chief Petty Officer Miller, a solid man in his mid-40s with a face etched by 2 decades of service, gave them a nod. Miller managed the security checkpoints with an efficiency Alex admired. "Appreciate you and the dog giving us a hand. This rotation is a logistical nightmare." "Glad to help, Chief," Alex responded, his voice a low monotone. Thor needed the work. "He's a remarkable animal," Miller said, his gaze on Thor filled with respect. "Never seen one so focused. The other dogs are good, but he's on another level." Alex simply nodded, giving Thor a brief scratch behind the ears, the only outward sign of affection he permitted while on duty. Thor's tail gave a single, firm thump against the concrete. The hangar was set up for a standard security sweep. A long line of olive drab duffel bags and black Pelican cases was arranged in a precise row on the floor. Personnel from SEAL teams, SWCC, and EOD units mingled nearby, sipping coffee, their conversations a low hum of technical jargon and inside jokes. It was the mundane reality of their extraordinary lives. Before any equipment could be loaded onto the transport plane bound for a joint training exercise in the North Atlantic, it had to be cleared. "All right, Thor. Seek," Alex gave the quiet command. Thor moved with a fluid, purposeful grace. He walked the line, his nose just inches from the canvas and plastic, sniffing in the rapid, staccato bursts of a master craftsman. His entire body was a finely calibrated instrument. Alex walked just behind him, the leash held loosely in his hand, his focus entirely on his partner. He watched the subtle shift of Thor's ears, the angle of his tail, the tension in his shoulders. Alex could read Thor's every signal. The dog passed the first bag, belonging to an EOD technician. No reaction. He passed the second, a corpsman's medical kit. Nothing. He moved past a heavy Pelican case that smelled of gun oil and salt water. Thor gave it an extra sniff but continued on. His discipline was absolute. This was Thor's specialty. He was trained to detect a wide array of explosives, narcotics, and concealed electronics. But his true value lay in his passive alert. Thor didn't just find contraband, he sensed wrongness. He could detect the minute chemical changes in human scent produced by extreme stress, fear, or deception. He was, effectively, a 4-legged polygraph. Alex's gaze drifted to a group of technicians waiting at the far end of the hangar. They were from a specialized communications unit, the quiet professionals who handled the encrypted gear that enabled the SEALs' missions. Among them was a young sailor, Petty Officer 2nd Class Leo Vance. Vance was in his early 20s, slender, with the pale complexion of someone who spent more time with circuit boards than sunshine. He kept his eyes down, avoiding the boisterous operators around him, seemingly fascinated by his own boots. He looked nervous, but most support personnel did around a hangar full of SEALs. Thor continued down the line, methodical and calm, the very picture of canine professionalism. Alex let his own mind wander for a moment, thinking of the hot meal and cold beer that awaited him, when Thor stopped dead. It wasn't a gradual halt. It was as if he'd run into a glass wall. He stood 2 feet from a standard-issue green canvas duffel. Alex's heart rate instantly spiked. Thor's head was lowered, his nose aimed at the bag, his body completely rigid. "Thor," Alex said softly, "a test." The dog didn't flinch. A low rumble started deep in his chest, a growl so quiet Alex felt it through the leash before he heard it. Thor's ears were flat against his skull, his eyes locked on the bag with a chilling intensity. It was Leo Vance's bag. Alex's grip on the leash tightened. "Thor, easy." Thor ignored him. His body grew even more rigid, his shoulder muscles bunched. He took a single, stiff-legged step forward, his nose nearly touching the zipper. The growl deepened, becoming an audible, menacing sound. This was not his trained alert, this was a threat display. "Lieutenant?" Miller called out, noticing the break in the sweep. Across the hangar, Petty Officer Vance looked up, his eyes wide with a sudden, sharp fear. He licked his lips, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "Thor, stand down," Alex commanded, his voice firm but low, trying to regain control. And then Thor did the one thing he was trained, drilled, and conditioned never to do during a passive sweep. He barked. It wasn't a casual bark. It was a single, explosive report that cracked through the vast hangar like a rifle shot. It was a bark of pure, focused aggression. Every conversation died. Every head in the hangar turned toward them. Thor planted his front paws, lowered his head, and stared at the bag as if it were a mortal enemy. His message was unmistakable: danger. Here. Now. A cold dread washed over Alex. In 4 years of high-stakes operations, from intense firefights to parachute jumps, Thor had never once broken discipline. He had never barked at a bag. He had never shown this level of aggression toward an inanimate object. Leo Vance went rigid, the blood draining from his face. Miller and 2 other master-at-arms began to advance, their hands moving instinctively toward their sidearms. "Thor," Alex said again, his voice dangerously quiet. "Heel." The dog glanced back at him for a fraction of a second, his intelligent eyes burning with a message Alex understood instantly: "I will not." Thor turned back to the bag and let out another sharp, defiant bark. He was challenging it. He was challenging Alex. He was telling the entire base that whatever was in that duffel was fundamentally wrong, and he would not yield until the threat was addressed. Alex looked from his partner, the animal he trusted more than any human, to the terrified young sailor across the room. He knew, with absolute certainty, that his cool-down period was over. The echo of Thor's second bark hung in the air, trapping the hangar in a moment of suspended tension. Every operator, technician, and security officer was now an unwilling audience. Thor remained a statue of coiled fury, his gaze locked on the green duffel, a low, continuous growl vibrating in his chest. Alex maintained a firm grip on the leash, positioning his body slightly in front of Thor as a silent buffer. "Lieutenant!" A voice squeaked, high and panicked. Petty Officer Leo Vance stumbled forward, his face a blotchy mess of red and white. His fear had twisted into a loud, defensive rage. "Get your dog under control. What's wrong with it? It's malfunctioning." Alex's gaze snapped from Thor to Vance. "Petty Officer, stay right where you are." His voice was low and calm, yet it carried an authority that sliced through the hangar's tension. "It's just my stuff," Vance insisted, gesturing wildly at the bag. "Clothes, my tablet, some books. Your dog is broken, Lieutenant. Call it off." "Chief Miller, secure the perimeter," Alex said, ignoring Vance's hysterics. Miller, who had been moving with purpose, nodded. "Already on it, sir. Bag and Petty Officer are isolated." His men had fanned out, creating a clear space, their expressions tense. They knew Thor. They knew this wasn't right. The murmuring among the assembled personnel grew. A SEAL's K-9, especially one with Thor's reputation, breaking protocol so dramatically was more than a mere incident, it was a bad omen. "What in God's name is going on here?" The new voice was sharp and cut through the tension like a blade. It belonged to Commander Samuel Stonewall Jackson, the squadron's executive officer. Jackson was a man in his 50s with the rigid posture of a man half his age, his uniform impeccably creased. His gray, piercing eyes swept the scene, cataloging the disruption with obvious annoyance. Jackson was a man who lived by the book. He believed in procedure, the chain of command, and hard evidence. He had no time for gut feelings and even less for disruptions on his watch. Miller had clearly made the call the moment things escalated. "Lieutenant Renner," Jackson said, his voice quiet but heavy with rank. He strode directly toward Alex, stopping a few feet away. "I was informed your asset was out of control. Explain this." "Sir," Alex said, holding his position, his eyes on his dog. "Thor has given an aggressive, positive alert on that duffel bag." "An alert?" Jackson scoffed. This looks like a failure to follow a basic command. Lieutenant, this is a secure military facility, not a dog park. Get your animal out of my hangar so we can get back on schedule. This was the critical moment. A direct order. Over Jackson's shoulder, Alex could see Vance's expression morph from panic to a smug, premature relief. "See, sir," Vance said, his voice still trembling. "I told them. It's nothing. The dog is just spooked." Jackson fixed Alex with a stare that had intimidated men of far higher rank. "Lieutenant, I will not say it again. Remove the dog." Alex looked down at Thor. The dog was trembling, not with fear, but with a barely contained violent energy. His growl was unwavering. Then Thor did something new. He let out a soft, high-pitched whine, a sound of profound distress, without breaking his aggressive stance. He looked up, meeting Alex's eyes. The message was excruciatingly clear: "Please, trust me. Don't make me leave this." Everything seemed to slow down. Alex felt the crushing weight of his career settle on his shoulders. To disobey a direct order from his XO, in public, was professional suicide. He would be benched, investigated, likely reassigned. He would lose his team. Worse, he would lose Thor. But Thor had never been wrong. Not in the mountains. Not in the jungle. Not ever. Alex lifted his head and met the commander's icy gaze. His voice was steady and respectful, but utterly inflexible. "Sir, I cannot. I will not. A sharp, collective intake of breath seemed to be drawn from everyone in the hangar. Miller's eyes went wide. Jackson's already stern face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Lieutenant Renner," Jackson said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You are on the verge of a court-martial." "I understand that, Commander," Alex said, his focus absolute. "But this MWD is the most reliable partner I have ever worked with. He has never given a false positive. He has never broken protocol. His reaction is not a malfunction, sir. It is a critical warning. I am formally requesting a complete, invasive search of Petty Officer Vance's bag and person, based on this MWD's undeniable alert." He took a breath, sealing his fate. "I am staking my career on it." The silence that followed was absolute, stretching for 2 long seconds. Vance looked as if he was about to be physically ill. Commander Jackson stared at Alex, searching his face for any hint of doubt or instability. He found only the calm, unwavering conviction of a man who had already made his choice. Jackson's jaw tightened. He snapped his head toward the chief. "Miller." "Sir." Miller snapped to attention. "Secure Petty Officer Vance and that bag. Take them to the secondary screening room. I want that bag stripped down to its last fiber. Get a full body scan on the Petty Officer. Find out what my lieutenant is willing to throw his career away for." "Aye, sir," Miller said, signaling his men. They moved in on Vance, who went limp with terror, his false bravado gone. Another MA, wearing heavy gloves, carefully approached the bag. "Thor, stand down," Alex said gently. As the bag was lifted, Thor's growl finally ceased, replaced by a low whine. He sat, but his eyes never left the bag as it was carried through a side door, followed by the pale, trembling form of Leo Vance. "Lieutenant Renner," Jackson said, his voice like gravel. "Sir. You will wait here. You will not speak to anyone. When Chief Miller has his answer, you and I will have a discussion in my office. Pray for your sake that your dog is right." Alex stood alone in the center of the hangar, the other personnel awkwardly resuming their tasks, casting furtive glances his way. He reached down and rested his hand on Thor's head. The dog leaned into his touch, his body still wired, but his part of the mission was done. The heavy steel door of the screening room clanged shut, a sound of finality. The wait began. It was a suffocating, sterile silence broken only by the hum of the ventilation and the distant, muffled sounds of base operations. Thor sat at Alex's knee, a taut wire of contained energy. His aggressive growling had stopped, but his focus remained absolute, his head cocked, listening. Alex stood immobile, feeling the invisible weight of the stairs he had left behind. In the span of 5 minutes, he had transitioned from a respected operator to a pariah. He had publicly defied his executive officer. He had gambled his entire career, his reputation, and his partnership with Thor on a bark. A cold sickness began to creep into his stomach. What if you were wrong, boy? The thought was a betrayal, but he couldn't stop it. What if Vance was just a nervous kid, and you mistook his anxiety for malice? Thor was the best, but nothing was infallible. For the first time, Alex truly considered the possibility of failure. The image of a desk job at a recruitment center in Omaha flashed through his mind. The door to the screening room hissed open. Chief Petty Officer Miller stood in the entryway, his face an unreadable mask. "Commander Jackson requests your presence in screening room 2. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. He nodded, his throat tight. "Thor, heel." The walk across the hangar floor felt a mile long. The whispers ceased, replaced by the heavy stares of every man present. Thor trotted beside him, his claws clicking on the polished concrete, oblivious to the professional drama, focused only on the task. Screening room 2 was a small, windowless box painted a sterile white and lit by harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights. Commander Jackson stood in the center of the room, his arms crossed, his expression thunderous. Petty Officer Leo Vance was slumped on a plastic stool in the corner, looking pale and shaky. But Alex detected a new, unmistakable flicker of smug relief in his eyes. On the steel table in the center of the room, contents were scattered: a pile of wrinkled olive drab t-shirts, several pairs of socks, a toiletries bag, its contents, a toothbrush, deodorant, razor laid out, and a small handheld gaming console. That was it. The bag itself, now empty, was tossed on the floor. "Lieutenant Renner," Jackson began, his voice deceptively soft, vibrating with controlled rage. This is the critical threat you identified?" He gestured disdainfully at the pile of laundry. "This is what you stopped a multi-million-dollar transport operation for. Dirty laundry and a video game." Alex's world tilted. He looked at the pile. Nothing. He looked at Thor. The dog was standing, sniffing the air, but the explosive aggression was gone. He looked at Vance, who was visibly relaxing, a slight, insolent smile playing on his lips. "We ran the bag," Miller stated formally, though he avoided looking directly at Alex. X-ray showed the console. "Standard toiletries. We hand-searched every pocket, every seam. There is nothing, sir. The petty officer is clean." Alex felt sick. He had done it. He had thrown his entire life away. He had trusted, and he had been wrong. "I see that, Chief," Jackson snapped. He turned his full, icy fury on Alex. "Your asset malfunctioned. You failed to control it. And worst of all, you chose to escalate that failure into a disgraceful act of insubordination in front of my men." Jackson took a step closer. "Your judgment is compromised, Lieutenant. Your career in this command is over. I am grounding you effective immediately. You will hand Thor over to the kennels for reassessment. Now get your animal and report to my office." It was a death sentence. "Yes, sir," Alex's voice was hollow. He moved to put the lead on Thor's vest, his mind numb. But Thor had ignored everyone. He was not looking at the table. Not at Jackson, not at Vance. His gaze was locked on the empty duffel bag lying discarded on the floor. As Alex reached for him, Thor suddenly lunged, pulling the leash taut before Alex could even grab it. "Thor!" Alex yelled, shocked. "I said, control your dog!" Jackson roared. Thor ignored them both. He wasn't attacking. He was searching. He shoved his snout deep into the empty canvas bag, sniffing with frantic, huffing bursts. He then pulled his head out and let out that high-pitched whine again, the sound of pure, desperate frustration. Then his paws went into action. He began to scratch. He dug at the fabric bottom of the empty bag with a focused, violent energy. Rip, rip, rip. His claws tore at the reinforced canvas. "Stop him. He's destroying my bag." Vance shrieked, jumping up from his stool, his panic suddenly returning. But Miller, his eyes wide, took a step forward. "Sir, wait. Look." He pointed at the dog's paws. "He's not just digging. He's digging at the bottom. It's not flexible." Miller grabbed the bag, pushing Thor back gently. "Easy, boy. I got it." He felt the base of the duffel. His face changed. "Sir, it's rigid, and the weight is wrong. It's too heavy." Jackson fell silent, his eyes narrowing. Miller pulled a utility knife from his vest. He didn't wait for an order. He jammed the blade into the bottom liner and sliced it open from seam to seam. He gripped the edge of the torn canvas and ripped the false bottom away. Underneath, nestled in a crude cutout of hardened black foam, was a small, dull gray box. It was metallic, seamless, and dense. The room went absolutely silent. The only sound was Thor's heavy, satisfied panting as he sat staring at the box. Vance made a choked, gasping sound, and his legs buckled. He slumped sideways off the stool onto the floor, completely boneless. "Bomb squad," Jackson said, his voice a strained whisper. "I don't think so, sir," Miller said, his voice grim. He was wearing tactical gloves and carefully lifted the box. It's heavy. Lead lined, I'd bet. Shielded. He examined a simple latch, flicked it open, and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a perfect, custom-cut bed of black foam, was a small, intricate piece of technology. It was a dense cluster of microchips, delicate gold wiring, and a tiny, specialized antenna. It was sleek, dark, and utterly forbidden. Jackson stared, his face pale. He didn't recognize the exact component, but he recognized the signature of classified, next-generation technology. What in God's name is that? Alex, his voice shaking but steady, stepped forward. His mind, trained for rapid threat identification, clicked into place. That's the prototype guidance module for the Sea Dragon drone program, sir. It's a next-generation navigation system. Self-correcting, non-GPS, top secret. It shouldn't even be on this coast. Jackson looked from the device to the collapsed form of Petty Officer Vance to the panting German shepherd. The implications were staggering. He lifted his hand to his radio, his voice betraying no emotion. This is Commander Jackson. I am declaring a base-wide security lockdown. I repeat, execute a full base lockdown. We have a confirmed security breach. He clicked off the radio and looked at Alex. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, dreadful understanding. Get that dog a steak, then get to my office. We're just getting started. Commander Jackson's office was a stark, controlled space. Framed citations and maps hung on the walls with geometric precision. The base-wide lockdown klaxon had fallen silent, replaced by an oppressive, heavy quiet. It had been 30 minutes. Alex stood at ease, Thor sitting patiently at his heel. Jackson was behind his desk, not speaking, his face carved from stone as he processed the magnitude of the breach. The Sea Dragon module, now secured by an EOD team, represented a catastrophic failure of security. The door opened without a knock. A woman entered, followed by two men in dark suits. She was the clear point of the spear. Commander Jackson, she stated, not asked. She was perhaps in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back into a severe bun and sharp, analytical eyes that missed nothing. She wore a dark gray pantsuit that was all business. Her name, Alex would learn, was Special Agent Kate Riley, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. She carried an aura of crisp, federal authority that immediately superseded the base's internal chain of command. Special Agent Riley, Jackson said, standing. This is Lieutenant Renner, the K-9 handler who identified the threat. Kate Riley's gaze shifted to Alex. It was not a friendly look. It was an appraisal, like a jeweler examining a stone for flaws. Lieutenant, I've read your initial statement. Let's clarify. You defied a direct order from your XO. My MWD gave a clear, aggressive alert, ma'am, Alex replied, his voice even. I acted on my partner's training. Your partner? She repeated, her eyes flicking down to Thor, who was watching her with calm, assessing intelligence. The report says the dog broke protocol, that it barked and showed aggression. Your own report. His response was atypical, yes, Alex said, choosing his words carefully. But it was decisive. He had never done it before, which is why I trusted it. It was an extreme alert for an extreme threat. Riley held his gaze for a long moment. I deal in evidence, Lieutenant. Not atypical feelings from an animal. You got lucky, your dog's nose, likely trained for a specific chemical in the shielding, found something. You gambled and it paid off. Don't mistake luck for a repeatable process. This was the friction. She was pure logic. He was trained instinct. We have Petty Officer Vance in custody in Interrogation Room 1, Jackson interjected, cutting off the brewing methodological debate. Good, Riley said, turning from Alex as if dismissing him. My team will handle him. I'd like to be present, Alex said. Riley turned back, one eyebrow slightly raised. Why? You're a SEAL, not an investigator. Your part in this is over. Thor was the one who alerted on Vance, not just the bag, Alex stated. Vance was terrified of him. His presence might expedite things. Kate stared at him, a flicker of new consideration in her eyes. She saw the logic in that. It was a pragmatic tool. Fine, she conceded. You and your partner will be present. You will stand in the corner. You will not speak, and you will not move. You are a visual aid. Understood? Understood, ma'am. The interrogation room was cold. Vance sat huddled at a small metal table, looking even younger and paler than he had in the hangar. He was physically shaking. Kate Riley entered and sat opposite him, calm and composed. Alex and Thor entered last. Alex took a position against the back wall, Thor sitting at his feet, facing Vance. The effect was instantaneous. Vance's eyes locked onto the dog, and a new, visceral wave of panic washed over him. "This is Special Agent Riley, NCIS," Kate began, her voice neutral. "I am reading you your rights. You have the right to remain silent." She went through the script with practiced, dispassionate efficiency. Vance just nodded, his eyes darting between Kate and the unblinking German shepherd in the corner. "Leo," Kate began, leaning forward. "We found the Sea Dragon module. We have you on video at the hangar. We have your duffel bag. The charges you're facing include espionage, treason, and theft of classified military hardware. Each of those carries a sentence that will ensure you die in a federal prison. That is a fact." Vance whimpered, tears welling. I didn't." "You didn't what?" Kate pressed, her voice sharpening. "You didn't put it in your bag? You didn't build a lead-lined false bottom?" "I had to." Vance suddenly burst out, his voice cracking. "They made me." "Who is they?" "I don't know. I swear." Kate sighed, leaning back. "Leo, you're not a good liar. You're a technician. You're scared. I am the only person who can help you right now, but you have to give me something better than they." Vance was dissolving, rocking back and forth. "They have pictures. They have my sister, her, and her son, my nephew. They said they'd hurt them." From the back of the room, Alex watched. He saw the shift. This wasn't a traitor. This was a victim. It was Alex's voice that broke the silence. He hadn't moved from the wall, but his tone was quiet, not interrogative, but empathetic. "What's your nephew's name, Leo?" "What?" Vance stammered, looking at Alex. "Your nephew," Alex repeated. "What's his name?" "Sam," Vance whispered. He's only 5. "You're doing this for Sam," Alex stated. It wasn't a question. Kate Riley watched, silent. She had been about to hammer Vance with logic, to break him down. Alex was building a bridge. This was not the blunt force SEAL stereotype she had expected. This was intelligent. This was perceptive. "They said they just needed one," Vance sobbed, the dam breaking. "Just one. They said no one would get hurt. He said he would protect my family if I just did this one thing." "Who, Leo?" Kate Riley said, her voice softer now, seizing the opening Alex had created. "Who is he?" Vance looked at the door as if afraid the man himself would walk through. "You're in a federal facility, Leo," Kate said, pushing. "No one can get to you here. But they can get to Sam unless you give us the name. Who is he?" Vance took a ragged breath, tears and snot streaming down his face. You all know him. He's here all the time. He's Mr. Sterling." The name landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Alex's blood went cold. Kate's professional mask slipped for just 1 second, revealing a flash of genuine shock. Arthur Sterling. Not just a contractor. Arthur Sterling was a legend on the base, a patriotic civilian consultant who had worked with naval special warfare for 2 decades. He was a wealthy, charismatic man in his late 50s with a warm smile and an uncle-like demeanor who often funded base charities. He had top-level clearance. He knew everyone. He was, Alex realized with a sickening jolt, untouchable. "Arthur Sterling," Kate repeated, her voice now flat and cold, all trace of softness gone. She had her target. She stood up. "The interview is over. My team will get a full statement." "Lieutenant," she said, nodding to Alex. He and Thor moved into the hall. She paused, looking at him, her analytical gaze reassessing him. "Your visual aid was effective, Lieutenant. You have a good instinct for an interrogation." It was the closest she could come to an apology. "Thor's the one who knew," Alex said, giving the dog a light scratch. He smelled the fear on Vance from 50 feet away. Kate watched the two of them. The blunt SEAL and his broken dog had just handed her the biggest espionage case of her career. And he had done it with a combination of raw instinct and sharp emotional intelligence. "Stay ready, Lieutenant," she said, her voice all business again. "I'm requisitioning you and your partner. This just went from a theft to a counterintelligence operation. And our target is one of the most trusted men on the East Coast." The war room was a cramped, windowless office in the NCIS resident agency building, hastily converted into a command post. It smelled of stale coffee, industrial-grade carpet, and the faint ozone tang of overworked servers. It was 0200. Outside, the base was locked in a cold pre-dawn silence, but in this room, the hunt was on. Special Agent Kate Riley was at the head of a large, scarred conference table, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of a laptop. The wall behind her was a mosaic of whiteboards already covered in data points, timelines, and one large, frustratingly clean photograph of Arthur Sterling. Sterling was, as Kate put it, a digital ghost. His profile was immaculate. He was a wealthy defense consultant, a widower, a philanthropist who chaired the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society ball every year. His background checks were flawless. His financials, routed through a dozen holding companies, were impenetrable. His security clearances were higher than most of the admirals on base. He was, by all accounts, a model of patriotic service. "He's clean," said a new voice laced with fatigue. This was Special Agent Mike Chen, Kate's lead tech analyst. Chen was a man who looked like he survived solely on caffeine and kilowatts, with dark circles under his eyes and fingers that blurred over his keyboard. "I've run every algorithm, checked his offshore accounts, mirrored his comms. Nothing. The man doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't even have a parking ticket. The only thing I have is he's in love with his boat." "That's not a crime," Kate said, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Leo Vance's confession is worthless without corroboration. Right now, it's the word of a terrified kid versus Uncle Arthur." Alex stood by the far wall, Thor lying quietly at his feet, his head on his paws, but his eyes open, watching. Alex had been a silent observer for hours, watching a different kind of war, one fought with data and warrants. He and Kate had fallen into a terse, efficient rhythm. He provided the operational context, she handled the legal and procedural maze. "Maybe we're looking for the wrong thing," Alex said quietly. Chen scoffed. "We're looking for anything, Lieutenant. A text, an email, a money transfer, a connection." "No," Alex said, moving toward the table. "You're looking for a mistake. A man like Sterling doesn't make mistakes. You're looking for data. What if the answer isn't in the data? What if it's in the behavior?" Kate looked up, her expression a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. "Go on." "He's been working here for 20 years, Alex said, thinking aloud. "He knows our protocols better than we do. He knows about X-rays, random searches. He knew about the K9 sweeps. So he built a lead-lined box," Kate said. "That just proves he's smart." "No, that's just the first step," Alex said. "A lead-lined box isn't a guarantee. It suppresses, but it doesn't always eliminate. A well-trained dog, a dog like Thor, could still pick up a trace, a faint scent, a chemical signature from the shielding itself. Sterling would know that. He couldn't just hope it would work. He would have to test it." Kate leaned forward, her fatigue vanishing. "Test it?" Alex's mind was racing, pulling at a thread of memory that had been bothering him for days. It was last week. The base hosted a joint capabilities demo for a congressional delegation. Sterling was there, shaking hands, being the perfect host. "My unit was tasked with a K9 demonstration, security, detection, the whole show." He closed his eyes, replaying the scene. The hot sun on the parade ground, the crowd of suits and uniforms. "Sterling came over to thank us for our service. He was carrying a briefcase, a different one, a slim, hard-shell aluminum case." "And?" Kate pressed. "And he stumbled," Alex said, the memory crystallizing. "It looked clumsy, but it wasn't. It was controlled. He stumbled, and his briefcase swung down right at Thor's eye level. He accidentally dropped it. Not hard, just placed it on the ground right in front of my dog. Thor, at Alex's feet, lifted his head as if sensing the memory. I pulled Thor back," Alex continued, his voice tight. "Told him, leave it." Sterling laughed, apologized. "Silly me. Hope I didn't spook your boy." But Thor, he wasn't spooked, and he didn't alert. "What did he do?" Kate asked. He snapped his head toward it," Alex said. "He did a hard sniff, that rapid huff. And then he let out a low huff, a breathy sound of confusion. Not aggression, not an alert. He was confused. He smelled something he was trained on, but it was mixed with something else, or it was too faint. I just thought it was the aluminum or the leather, and I pulled him away." Sterling picked up the case and walked away. Silence filled the room. Chen had stopped typing. "He wasn't testing the briefcase," Kate whispered, the terrifying implications dawning on her. "No," Alex said, meeting her eyes. "He was testing Thor. He was walking his shielding material right past our best assets. He was testing all the dogs. He needed to know which ones, if any, might register a faint hit. He needed to know which dog might be a threat to his operation." Alex looked down at his partner. When Thor smelled that same shielding compound in Vance's bag, stronger this time, more obvious, he didn't just alert. He recognized an old, confusing threat, and he went aggressive. Kate Riley stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She erased a complex financial diagram and in the center wrote Arthur Sterling. She circled it. Then she drew a line, and at the end of it, she wrote K9 testing. She turned to Alex. The barrier of professional skepticism between them was gone, replaced by the grim solidarity of two professionals staring into the same abyss. He's not just a thief, she said, her voice cold and hard. He's a counterintelligence operator. He's been hunting us right under our noses for God knows how long. She looked at Alex, and for the first time, her analytical gaze held a trace of genuine, profound respect. Your dog didn't just get lucky, Lieutenant. He's the only one who ever saw the real man. The momentum from the night's discovery had slammed into a bureaucratic wall. It was now 0700, and the NCIS war room was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and recycled air. The Sterling testing Thor theory was brilliant. It was compelling, and as Kate Riley had discovered in the last 4 hours, it was completely inadmissible. His travel records are sealed by a DoD directive, Kate said, pacing in front of the whiteboard. Her voice was flat, devoid of the energy from the night before. His financials are firewalled. I tried to get a warrant to search his home, citing the K9 theory. The judge laughed me out of his virtual chambers. He said, and I quote, "You want to raid one of the most decorated civilians on the East Coast based on a dog's memory?" Alex stood by the window, watching the base personnel move about their day, the lockdown having been downgraded to a heightened alert. It's not a memory, Agent Riley. It's a data point. The dog registered a scent. That scent was later found at a crime scene. Prove it, Kate shot back, though her frustration wasn't aimed at him. Prove what he smelled. Right now, all we have is a box. Sterling will just say Vance acted alone, that Vance sourced the shielding himself. We have nothing that ties Sterling to that box. Alex turned from the window. Then let's focus on the box. You're a logic-based investigator. What's the logic? Sterling needed to shield a high-frequency guidance system. Why lead? It's heavy. It's old tech. It's obvious on an X-ray. Why not a modern carbon composite shielding? He paused, thinking. And why did Thor react so violently? It wasn't just the shielding. It was the scent of it. Vance's bag smelled like fear, but the box itself, Thor hated it. He was angry at it. Kate stopped pacing. She looked at the evidence bag on the table, which now contained the lead line foam box. The lab is running a full analysis, but I just ticketed it as shielding. I didn't tell them to look for anything else. What if the shielding is the link? She grabbed her phone and strode out of the room, her voice already sharp. Get me Dr. Evans at the forensics lab, now. Alex knelt and scratched Thor's head. You knew, didn't you, boy? It smelled like something bad. Thor let out a low huff, pressing his head into Alex's hand. Kate returned a minute later, her focus restored. Evans is on it. Dr. Evans, head of the base lab. He's meticulous, which means slow, but I told him it was a matter of national security. He promised to call the second he has a preliminary analysis. While we wait, she said, pulling a chair up to the conference table and opening her laptop, show me everything about Thor. His files? His life, she clarified. I've read the standard jacket. I know he's certified. I want to see the obscure files, the vet records, the daily training logs, the classified scent profiles. If we're betting the biggest case of my career on this dog, I want to know him better than you do. For the next 2 hours, they sat side by side, scrolling through the digital K9 records. It was an intimate look into Alex's world. Kate, the logic-driven agent, was fascinated. She saw the data points behind the instinct. His tolerance for explosive compounds is in the 98th percentile, she murmured, reading a test result. He's better on nitrates, Alex provided. He's weaker on plastics. He hates the smell of acetone. It makes him sneeze. Cute, she said, not looking up. Okay, what's this? Project Cerberus, DARPA funded, 200 hours, classified. Alex leaned in. Ah, that. It was a theoretical threat program. We spent 3 months on it. Honestly, I thought it was a waste of time. The profile was almost impossible to source. What was it? A stabilized organic precursor, Alex said, a chemical weapons component. The theory was that a new agent could be synthesized using 2 separate, seemingly benign compounds. Thor was trained on component A. It's a rare bioorganic compound derived from a specific fungal protein. On its own, It's harmless, non-volatile, stable, and has almost no scent signature to a human. But it's the key. We trained on it for months, and Thor hated it. The trainers said the faint signature must have triggered a primal wrongness response in his olfactory system. A non-volatile organic compound, Kate said, typing notes. Why? That's why it's so dangerous. You could smuggle it right past a standard EOD dog. Thor was one of only 5 MWDs to complete the certification. His final test, he found a sample the size of a pinhead inside a sealed ammunition can. So he's a chemical weapons dog, Kate mused. On paper, Alex said. We never, ever saw it in the field. It was just a what-if scenario. The encrypted desk phone buzzed, sharp and loud. Kate snatched it. Riley. She was silent, listening. Dr. Evans, she said, her voice tight. You're on speaker with Lieutenant Renner. A dry, precise voice crackled through the phone. Agent Riley, this is fascinating. Your shielding box. It's not just lead. Lead is just the container. The shielding properties are secondary. Secondary to what, Doctor? Kate asked. To the compound inside the lead, ma'am. It's impregnated, infused into the metal matrix. It's an organic metallic hybrid. We're running the mass spectrometer now, but the primary organic component. It's incredibly unusual. It's a stabilized fungal protein. Specifically, drive. Evans began to read off a long, complex chemical designation. Alex felt the blood drain from his face. He stared at his laptop screen, where the Project Cerberus file was still open. He tapped the screen, his finger trembling slightly. Kate's eyes followed his finger. She looked at the chemical name on the file. She looked back at the phone. The name Dr. Evans was reading was an exact match. And it's a brilliant shielding agent, Evans continued, unaware of the bombshell he had just dropped. Its properties would absorb, not just block, most electronic frequencies. It's almost organic camouflage. I've never seen anything like it. Where did you find this? Alex and Kate looked at each other. The room was deathly quiet. It was the eureka moment. Sterling hadn't just tested a shielding on Thor. He had, with supreme, arrogant confidence, chosen a shielding material that he believed was the perfect, undetectable camouflage, a rare, non-volatile, odorless organic compound. He never in a million years could have known that the US government had a secret theoretical DARPA program, and he never could have known that he stumbled and dropped his briefcase in front of the one dog on the entire East Coast who had been specially trained to find that exact chemical. Kate slowly hung up the phone. The skepticism, the frustration, the barrier between them, it all evaporated. She looked at Alex, and her analytical gaze was replaced by something approaching pure awe. My God, Lieutenant, she whispered. He thought he was invisible. He was, Alex said, looking down at Thor, who was now asleep, his task complete. He just picked the wrong dog to test. The air at the Willoughby Bay Marina was cold and heavy with the smell of low tide, diesel, and salt. It was 2230. The fog that had plagued Norfolk had rolled inland, swallowing the high-masted sailboats and luxury yachts in a ghostly white veil. This was Sterling's world, public yet anonymous. Agent Chen's digging had been right about one thing. Sterling loved his boat, a 60-foot racing yacht named the Albatross, which was currently docked in this very marina. The Project Cerberus discovery had changed everything. It was the probable cause Kate needed. A federal judge, upon seeing the classified DARPA file next to the lab report, had signed a sweeping warrant. The plan was set. They were going to use Sterling's own arrogance against him. Leo Vance, now in protective custody, had made the call. His voice, guided by Kate, was a trembling, terrified wreck, which made it perfectly believable. He told Sterling's handler that he had another module, that he had grabbed a second one in the panic, and he needed out. He needed money, and he needed to disappear. The meat was set. Kate Riley was now in the line of fire. She was posing as Rachel, a new professional contact sent by Sterling's buyers to retrieve the dummy package and handle the Vance problem. She wore dark cargo pants, a black turtleneck, and a comms earpiece hidden by her hair. She looked less like a federal agent and more like a high-end courier, standing alone at the end of a floating dock. 200 yards away, on the roof of a two-story harbormaster's office, Lieutenant Alex Renner was prone, hidden behind an air conditioning unit. He was in full kit, his face streaked with camo paint, watching Kate through the thermal green eye of a high-powered spotting scope. Thor lay beside him, a silent shadow, his ears swiveling independently, cataloging the sounds of the harbor. Alex felt the familiar cold tightness in his chest. But this was different. It wasn't the detached focus of a mission. It was a sharp, personal anxiety. He had watched Kate prep for this, her face a mask of cold professionalism. He respected her courage, but this was a civilian, not an operator. She was walking into a nest unprotected. His job was overwatch. His instinct was to protect. Hawk 1, this is Raven, Kate's voice whispered in his ear, calm and steady. I am in position. Package is visible. No sign of target. Solid copy, Raven, replied Agent Chen, who was coordinating from an unmarked surveillance van packed with electronics parked a quarter-mile away. Eagle 1, Alex has eyes on. All other units are dark. Alex scanned the perimeter. The NCIS takedown team was in place, hidden on a boat 2 slips down, and another team was posing as fishermen near the parking lot. It was a good plan. It was logical. It was procedural. And Alex hated it. Vehicle approaching, Alex murmured into his mic. Single occupant, black sedan, matches Sterling's. The sedan rolled to a stop. Arthur Sterling emerged, looking every bit the carefree yachtsman. He wore a light gray polo shirt and slacks, projecting an air of casual confidence. He carried a small leather satchel. He walked down the ramp towards Kate, his smile visible even at this distance. Raven, target is approaching. Appears solo, Alex reported. Copy, Kate replied. I see him. Sterling reached Kate. They spoke. Alex watched their body language through the scope. Sterling was calm, almost charming. Kate was all business. She held up the small Pelican case containing the dummy module. Sterling reached for his satchel. This was the go signal. The moment Sterling's hand touched the case, the takedown team would move. Hold, Alex said, his voice suddenly sharp. What is it, Eagle 1? Chen's voice was tense. Second vehicle. No lights, Alex said, swinging his scope. A dark panel van had ghosted into the parking lot, parking in the shadows 100 yards from the primary meet. I have 3 targets disembarking. Dark clothing, moving fast. They are not ours. All units, hold, Chen commanded. We have a compromised meet. Eagle 1, talk to me. They're flanking, Alex hissed. They're professionals. One is moving east toward the fuel depot, the other 2 are splitting, taking the high ground on the boardwalk. Sterling is not alone. This is not a pickup. This is an execution. On the dock, Sterling's demeanor had changed. His smile was gone. He was stalling, talking to Kate, keeping her occupied. Raven, Alex said, his voice tight. You have uninvited guests, 3 of them. They are armed, and they are moving to flank you. Kate's posture didn't change, but Alex saw her hand subtly shift toward the small of her back where her weapon was holstered. I see the east side flanker, Alex said, tracking a tall man moving silently between the boats. He's good. The man moved with a fluid, disciplined economy that screamed special operations. He disappeared behind a large sailboat into Kate's blind spot. Chen, I've lost him, Alex said. He's in the channel, moving between the boats. He's going to come up right behind her. Takedown team, move to intercept, Chen ordered. Negative, Alex said. They'll be seen. He's too close. He'll take her out before they're halfway there. On the dock, Sterling looked at his watch. It's a beautiful night, isn't it? His voice crackled over the open mic, a signal. Alex saw it. A shadow detaching itself from another shadow, the flanker. He was on the dock behind Kate, slowly raising a suppressed pistol. He was 40 feet from her. There was no time. The takedown team was too far. A rifle shot from Alex's position would initiate a firefight, and Kate was the most exposed target. He had one option. It was illogical. It was unapproved. It was instinct. He clicked his mic twice, the signal for standby, not go. He leaned down to Thor, who was already on his feet, sensing the tension, his body vibrating. Alex pointed, not at Sterling, but at the thermal signature of the man in the darkness behind Kate. Thor. Watch. The dog's eyes locked. Get him. There was no hesitation. Thor vaulted from the rooftop, landing silently on the corrugated roof of the floor below, then launched himself again into the darkness of the parking lot. He was a 90-pound black projectile, a silent, furry missile. He moved with a speed that was almost supernatural. The flanker heard nothing. He was sighting on Kate. Now, Arthur, he whispered into his own mic. No, Alex said, watching through the scope. Thor hit the dock at a full 40-mile-per-hour sprint. He covered the 40 feet in just over a second. The flanker must have heard the thump-thump-thump of his paws on the wood because he started to turn, his eyes wide with shock. He was too late. Thor launched, his body parallel to the ground, and hit the man square in the chest. The impact was horrific. The man was lifted off his feet, his pistol discharging harmlessly into the sky as he and the dog crashed backward onto the dock. Go, go, go. NCIS. Chen roared over the comms. The world exploded. Floodlights lit the marina. The takedown team swarmed from the boat in the parking lot. Sterling, stunned, reached for his ankle. Kate, reacting instantly, drew her weapon and had it pressed to his temple before he could even straighten. Don't even breathe. Thor was on top of the downed flanker, his teeth bared, his growl a sound from a nightmare. The man was not moving. Alex chambered around, scanning for the other two shooters, who had frozen, caught in a net of floodlights and federal agents. It was over. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, his hands shaking slightly. He keyed his mic. Eagle 1 to Raven. There was a pause. He heard Kate's heavy breathing. Raven, copy, she said, her voice unsteady for the first time. Good dog, Lieutenant. Good dog. The downfall of Arthur Sterling was not a quiet event. It was a seismic shock that ripped through the highest echelons of naval special warfare. The man they called Uncle Arthur was a traitor, a fact so profound it felt like a betrayal of physics, as if gravity had suddenly reversed. The capture of his private security team, former foreign special operators, and the subsequent raids on his homes and offices uncovered a network of espionage that ran deeper than anyone had dared to imagine. The Sea Dragon module was just the tip of the spear. For Alex, the 2 days following the Marina incident were a blur of debriefs and after-action reports. He and Thor were the center of a storm, lauded by NCIS and studied by Base Command. The resolution came on a crisp, clear morning, exactly 1 week after the first bark in Hangar 4. Commander Jackson had called a mandatory formation for the entire squadron. The air was cool, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. Alex stood in the front rank, Thor at a perfect parade rest sit at his side. Jackson strode to the podium, his face as stern as ever, but his eyes, when they scanned the formation, held a new, heavy humility. We train for threats we can see, Jackson began, his voice amplified by the PA system. We drill, we plan, and we execute based on protocol, because protocol saves lives. It is the bedrock of our discipline. He paused, his gaze sweeping the hundreds of operators and support staff. And then sometimes, protocol is wrong. He turned and looked directly at Alex. 1 week ago, I gave a direct order to Lieutenant Renner to stand down. I told him to remove his asset, to ignore his instincts, and to follow my orders. I was wrong. A low murmur went through the ranks. Lieutenant Renner was faced with an impossible choice, Jackson continued, his voice resonating with conviction. His training or his partner? Protocol or instinct? He chose his partner. In doing so, he publicly defied his executive officer, an act that could have, and should have, ended his career. Jackson stepped away from the podium and walked until he was standing directly in front of Alex. Thor's tail thumped once on the pavement. His defiance, Jackson said, his voice now quiet but heard by everyone, prevented the single greatest security breach in this base's history. His trust in his partner, a trust forged in combat, proved more accurate than my 20 years of experience. He reminded me, and he has reminded all of us, that our partners, canine or human, are our greatest assets. That instinct, when honed by discipline, is the sharpest weapon we have. He turned back to the formation. Lieutenant Renner's career is not over. His actions, and the actions of his MWD Thor, will be submitted for the highest commendations. This incident will be studied at Naval Special Warfare as a lesson in leadership. Lieutenant, I apologize publicly. He held out his hand. Alex, his face impassive but his heart hammering, snapped a salute, which Jackson returned before they shook hands. Thank you, sir, Alex said. No, Lieutenant, Jackson said, his grip like steel. Thank you. And thank your dog. The formation was dismissed, but Alex was immediately surrounded, clapped on the back, his hand shaken. Thor endured the head pats with noble patience. The stigma was gone, replaced by a deep, profound respect. Later that afternoon, the world was quiet. Alex was at the K-9 training facility, a sprawling grassy field on the far side of the base, far from the hangars and the offices. The air smelled of cut grass and the nearby ocean. It was just him and Thor, engaged in a simple game of fetch, a cool down in the truest sense. Thor, free of his working vest, was a blur of joyful energy. Lieutenant Renner. He turned. Special Agent Kate Riley was standing at the edge of the field. She was not the same woman from the war room. The severe bun was gone, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing jeans, running shoes, and a plain gray sweatshirt. She looked younger and, for the first time, uncertain. "Agent Riley," Alex said, surprised. He tossed the ball one last time for Thor. "Or is it Kate?" "Kate is fine," she said, walking onto the grass. "Technically, I'm off duty. The case is being handed over to DC. It's over then." "For us?" "Yes," she said. She stopped a few feet from him, her hands in her pockets. "I came too." "Well," Thor trotted back, the ball in his mouth, and dropped it at her feet, looking up expectantly. Kate laughed, a short, genuine sound. "He's not all business, then." "He's all business when it counts," Alex said, smiling. Kate reached into her pocket and pulled something out. It was a Kong Extreme, a notoriously indestructible black rubber chew toy. "I did some research," she said, offering it. "Heard these are seal-proof." Thor dropped the ball, grabbed the new toy with a happy snort, and trotted off to a patch of shade to investigate it. "He approves," Alex said. "Good," Kate said. They stood in a comfortable, slightly awkward silence for a moment, just two people on a sunny field. "The man you saved at the marina," Kate said quietly, looking at Thor. "The one Thor hit. He was ex-French Gigan. He never would have missed. You know that, right?" "I know," Alex said. She finally turned, her analytical gaze gone, replaced by something raw and human. "I've been a federal agent for 12 years, Lieutenant. I've built my entire life on evidence, on facts, on what I can see and prove. I don't do leaps of faith." She took a breath. "You and Thor, you operate on something else, something I didn't understand. And it saved my life. I came here to say thank you. I owe you both my life." Alex looked at her. The sharp-edged, formidable agent was gone, and in her place was just Kate. The tension he always carried in his shoulders, the coiled readiness of an operator, seemed to loosen. He gave a small, genuine smile, the first one that had reached his eyes in a long time. "I think you can repay me with a cup of coffee." Kate looked up, surprised, and then a slow smile spread across her face. "Coffee? I can do coffee." "Is that a fact, Agent Riley?" he asked, his tone light. "It is," she replied. "And please, call me Kate." Their eyes met. It was no longer an assessment, no longer a challenge. It was just a simple, human connection, a promise of a new and far more logical beginning.